Motoring in Britain used to be serene, well-mannered. Some might have even called it romantic.
The modern miss receives her proposal, as likely as not, sitting in the front seat of her young man's car, or possibly it's his dad's car, which he sneaked for the occasion.
Well, here comes a bucket of cold water, matey. Empty roads and pootling around in search of somewhere to have a picnic is as outdated as sexual stereotyping.
While man listens to the engine, woman is looking at the appearance, the upholstery, the colour scheme, and all those refinements which delight her in a car.
But don't for 1 minute think that because the Brill cream has gone out of motoring along with the romance, that Britain's love affair with the car is over. It simply evolved with a pace that would leave Darwin breathless into something day-glow.
Yes! In the summertime when the weather is high and you can stretch right up and touch the sky when the weather is fine.
The latest trend to sweep the nation is the cruise. You and a couple of thousand of your closest friends paint your cars scarlet, add lights from a 747 and head off to a car park somewhere. Once there, you listen to one another's engines and gramophone records.
Hold on, there's a good bit coming in a minute. In a minute. Wait a minute, there's a really good bit coming. I've got all his albums. I'm so old. I'm old.
After the music becomes boring, you set fire to everything.
I've got an 8-foot firework fountain coming off the roof, 6-foot fountain going off the spoiler while I'm doing my burnout.
He's got me going, mate, I tell you. He's got me going.
And I've probably got the best painted car here anyway.
No, you haven't.
Simple stuff. The extraordinary thing is, though, that our love affair with the car is so resilient. I mean, it's managed to survive the complete decimation of our car industry. In this, the 100th year of car production in Britain, we look around to find that pretty well every single great name is gone. Gilbert, born 1959, died 1973. And when it went, so did Wales's status as the world's only car-producing principality. Northern Ireland tried to get in on the act too, but unfortunately they entrusted the show to an American drug dealer. DeLorean, born 1980, died 1982. One of the oldest car names in Britain, AC, was revived just before Christmas by a bunch of Americans. Jaguar too is now owned by the Americans, and so is Aston Martin. Rover was snaffled up by the Germans, and in November, Lotus became Malaysian. So what on earth went wrong here?
Whilst I accept that the trade unions would have to accept some responsibility, the major responsibility was management, who took all the policy decisions, which the trade unions had got no control over, and they stood or fell by those decisions. Unfortunately, they fell.
I think that you can attribute blame equally among them. I mean, the politicians interfered in the running of an industry which they should never have got involved in. The management were incompetent, and the unions were venal and stupid, and the inevitable eventually came about.
Well, it was a failure to respect manufacture, a failure to invest in manufacture, a failure to recognise that people who create wealth are those who do the actual work.
It's not just what government did, it's not just what the unions did. It's not just that the unions didn't control their shop stewards. It is also because managers had a duty to manage and they weren't doing it. That is a big part of the problem. I think everyone is to blame.
Everyone and everything. I mean, British Leyland had the Marina and the Allegro, two awful cars from the same company competing against each other. That's idiotic.
The Marina was intended for the fleet market, was what we wanted. The Allegro, which I always thought was a rather nice car, you motoring experts who know everything slammed it because you said it didn't look very nice. I still think it's quite a nice car today, actually.
It was a disaster from the start, the Allegro, and it had all sorts of faults, not least of all leakages which were horrendous, and the design was wrong, but that was what we had to make. And we got a philosophy, particularly under Stokes, that we did all our testing after we sold them on the roads. The customers did it for us.
You've been used by the management in the most cynical way.
More crazy still, in the first 6 months of Michael Edwards' reign, there were 357 stoppages at Longbridge alone. People only ever went to work, to sleep, or nick things.
I mean, you could get anything for any car in Birmingham, you know, for the price of a pint. But the wonderful thing about it, I remember when we moved there in '77, we went house hunting. We eventually bought a house from a guy who worked at the Castle Bromwich paint factory. And the house was painted British Racing green. There was an Allegro tobacco living room and an aquamarine metallic Montego silver bathroom. It was just everything in there had been nicked out of the paint shop.
Britain's wheeled past is now preserved in Aspic at the Heritage Motor Centre. But here in the grounds we find a rare thing, a British car that has escaped the attention of Mr. G. Reaper.
The very fabulous Reliant Rialto is in many ways like the Busby. Impractical, a bit daft perhaps, but an important part of Britain's cultural history. It, of course, isn't our only representative on the world scene. Slightly further up the scale, there's the Bentley Continental T. And then, right at the top, the new Rolls-Royce Silver Dawn. In between, though, there's an army of sports cars, headed up, I guess, by TVR and Morgan. And when I say army, I don't mean Captain Mannering and the Home Guard. I mean a fighting force like you simply wouldn't believe.
Every single car you see here is made in Britain by a British-owned company.
The GTN from Loughborough, available with a Rover K-Series engine so it can do 130 miles an hour. Comes with a removable hard roof so it can be a convertible, and it's yours for £7,000.
There are upwards of 80 small car companies in Britain, guys knocking out stuff in sheds, and you won't find that going on anywhere else in the world.
The Dakar here from Wilmington in Kent was used by Annika Rice. Should really have been called the Annie car. Pininfarina, Zagato, Bertoni, and now candy apple cars from Chelmsford in Essex. Now you're thinking, oh dear Clarkson, this time you've really blown it. Those are Lancia Stratos's Italian cars from the 70s. No, they aren't. They were built last week in Tunbridge Wells. The Value for Money award goes to the Lomax here. When the body on your 2CV is rusted away, simply chop it off and replace it with one of these. Total cost for the entire car you see here, £3,500. This one is a real sweetie. It's called the Royale and there's 1930 style, but underneath it's a Ford Granada. Anti-lock brakes, fuel injection, power steering, power windows. If you call the factory in Preston, they'll build one for you. Really rather nicely, for £18,000. You must also remember that this, the McLaren F1, the fastest road car in the world, also comes from Britain's cottage car industry.
So here we are in the third bedroom of a little house in Camberley where Dave has arranged his collection of spark plugs. Now, Dave, how many have you got?
I have about 3,000 different names.
3,000? Is it an expensive thing or are they fairly cheap to come by?
Some are as little as a couple of pounds, but plugs like the coil plugs can be 100, 150 pounds.
About what I'd pay for this entire car. Meet Hickey, whose matching beard and dodge have had a profound effect on his neat suburban neighbours.
Well, I was here first. Most people have moved in after me. So, you know, as I said, I lived here all my life, so they've arrived to it, really. It'd probably be quite a nice road if I didn't live here, wouldn't it? But,
Now look, I'm from Gardener's World. No, wait, Motorworld. And we need to talk.
His front lawn looks like a wrecker's yard, as does his sitting room. But out back, things get much worse.
Oh, well, now that's what I call a garden. And no need for a mower, eh?
No grass.
Have you lived here a long time?
Yeah, all my life. When I became old enough, my parents left home.
What left you to it?
Yeah.
So you could replace their vegetable plot with...
Dodge.
Is that what it is?
I mean, most of this is Dodge, yeah, with the exception of the 1909 Cadillac in the corner.
So you know what every single bit and bob is, then?
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing.
Every single part.
So that clutch bit there is
That clutch is a brake drum of the 1916 Dodge.
Right, let's go check out the workshop. So, what have we got here, then? Another Dodge?
No, this is a 1911 Sunbeam, which is thought to be the Shelsley Welsh hill climb car.
And you're restoring it?
Yeah. It's probably about the most important thing in my life at the moment.
Do you think this is a particularly British thing, this fiddling around like you do?
Well, I suppose it's what everybody else calls British eccentricity, but I think it's British normality.
Now, in Germany, talented engineers can work for Porsche or BMW. In Italy, there's Fiat. And in America, there's GM and Ford and Chrysler. But here, with no car industry left, talented engineers have only one option: motor racing. Unsurprisingly, it's a sport we totally dominate.
I think our most talented people are working on racing cars. A designer can have something on the drawing board and made within a week. I've heard it said from engineers who come to work at Williams that they could have worked for British Aerospace, they could have been working on a bit that goes in an aeroplane that they wouldn't see for 10 years. And then there's no job satisfaction in that for them. So motor racing gives a lot of job satisfaction to creative people.
We're an island race. The motor car is part of our life, has been for quite a few decades. And I think it's because the industry has grown so much in the UK in the last 30 or 40 years. Any young person who wants to race, whether it's go-karts or touring cars or the lower category of Formula cars, he finds it quite easy.
Nothing on the planet is quite so Italian as a blood-red Ferrari racing car. Well, in fact, the current F1 cars were actually designed in Guildford by this man, John Barnard. I wonder what the Italian fan would think if he knew.
I suppose he would think it was a necessary evil. I mean, first of all, I don't suppose they'd ever know that it was the part that we play in it. Secondly, I don't think he would consider the information that we've got over 40 people working here in England.
What those 40 people give to Ferrari is a chassis, something that, frankly, no other nation on Earth is any good at.
I was employed by Enzo Ferrari, and he wanted me to bring the chassis technology of the day to Ferrari. As soon as you work for Ferrari, you realise engine is king. It's this old type of thinking, but of course, we all know that the chassis can be, you know, as effective or more effective than the engines.
Look at the Formula One grid next year. With the exception of Minardi, who don't really count, every chassis is British. The world champion is British. Most of the team bosses are British. Well, Scottish anyway.
Britain's a very competitive nation, and I think that if you go right back in our history, it's a sort of clan structure that goes right through the country. So you've always had segments of the country competing with others. So I think we're very sports orientated in Britain, and it goes way back for centuries. So it's just now that we've got cars, we compete with cars just the same as we used to compete maybe in the Highland Games 100 years ago.
Fellow Scot Jackie Stewart has set his new team up in Milton Keynes. Did he ever think about going somewhere else?
Not at all. We had suggestions that it could be elsewhere. But I think it has to be not only in Britain, but in the middle of the technology belt, in the middle of Silicon Valley of motorsport. And that's where we are.
Some say 75% of all the world's motor racing comes out of Britain, a point that seems lost on the drivers.
The key thing is that it goes fast. You know, as long as it's a fast car, it could be made on anywhere in the world, and you'd be happy.
Now, Jacques came to F1 from the all-American world of IndyCar racing, except it's not quite as all-American as you might think.
The Americans are an extremely patriotic nation, and I think if they were to take the fact on board, and most of them, of course, are completely ignorant of the fact that all their racing cars, certainly in IndyCar racing, are designed and built in the United Kingdom, as are many of the engines. If they know this to be a fact, they tend to ignore it. Geographically, of course, the United Kingdom is excellent for all types of motorsport. We have a lot of races over here, probably far more than any other national series ever has, and quite a combination and mixture of different types of racing at different weekends. And so large industry has built around this, and it's just developed and become self-perpetuating.
Britain doesn't always get it right. I mean, sure, we gave the world televisions, telephones, jet engines and the hovercraft, but we have a dark side. Remember, we came up with concentration camps and rallying. Oh, no.
This is the hugely successful Mitsubishi Lancer rally car, made in Japan. Well, that's what you might think. Me, I could only think that it, or its driver, Richard Burns, was going to kill me.
We're going to crash!
I hope not.
Nothing is more certain than we're going to crash. Oh! Is this really necessary?
We're going straight on.
Oh, no, my God almighty. I hate you. I hate this car. Oh. You show off.
Sorry.
Oh, brilliant. How much of this car is British?
Well, the occupants all the time. Probably about 70% of the car. The main thing, of course, is it's built here. It's just the engine comes over from Japan. But just about all the mechanical parts are sourced and designed over here.
So there's some little bloke in a shed somewhere making that gear linkage.
Well, I hope it's not a little shed. I hope it's a reasonably big shed. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of different source parts on this car that will have come from small companies all around the UK. And hopefully the brakes as well. The brakes are British. And everybody's keen to get involved and everybody's keen to get things done quickly.
Are we nearly back yet?
Yeah. You'll be glad to know.
Here's the Lancer's chief competition for next year, the new two-door Subaru Impreza, designed and built in Banbury. Why?
Ideas and concepts and visions come from being within and among people who have got that virus, and that virus lives.
It lives in Britain.
The youth of today likes nothing more than coming out of an evening with its wheels, giving it large respect, kicking.
Am I crazy? Everyone says I am. Because, I mean, at Stafford I was taking the car up to 80 miles an hour on the spot.
What's happening?
You're commentating, mate.
I'm commentating, right! I'm supposed to be making a television programme here, but never mind, we'll bring this shot down Sierra in. Is he going to stay, or is he going to go? What happens here is they bring the car in and the crowd decides whether it stays or goes. Off! Off you go! Horrible, And who wants you to stay? Your mother wants you to stay, everyone else wants it out, so off you go.
Britain was first introduced to the car more than a century ago. But the passion is still so strong that you'd think we'd met in a disco just last night.
Give me what I need.
Off, 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 off! And your hats on back to front.